down to the final 8 teams as the quarter-final stage of the UEFA Champions League begins tonight in Europe. We have all of 3 Italian teams remaining, 2 from England and 1 from Spain, Portugal and Germany. It is a unique group which we have never seen before at this stage of the competition. These are the matchups we'll see over the next couple of days. On one side of the draw, we have Real Madrid against Chelsea and Man City against Bayern Munich. On the other side of the draw, the 3 Italian teams with 2 of them facing off, AC Milan against Napoli and Inter Milan matching wits with Benfica. However, all eyes will be focused on the cities of Lisbon and Manchester as 4 teams continue their quest to Istanbul at the top of the hour. It's time now to welcome the team, and online in particular, we welcome Brent Sancho, the former Trinidad and Tobago defender and former sports minister, and Juan Aranco, our chief South American football correspondent. My name is Donald Oliver. Thank you so much for joining our coverage here on the home of champions. Now, tell you what, gentlemen, over the next 8 days, we will decide the final 4 in the UEFA Champions League. You've seen the fixtures. What are you looking forward to the most? Starting with Brent.
I'm looking forward to Pep Guardiola finally getting over the hump because you would have to think this could be his year. My only concern, I must say, is that he's still within a battle at the Premiership level. But certainly the Man City versus Bayern Munich game is the most intriguing game for me in this round of fixture.
And Juan, your thoughts on the fixtures? What are you expecting?
I'm waiting to see what the next excuse is going to be for Pep Guardiola if he doesn't get to the next round, because he's surely been able to open and find reasons to say, well, we are not going to advance because of this. The other teams are the ones that are able to have the advantage. But not only that, it's more seeing what can Chelsea do under Frank Lampard a second time. What is Real Madrid going to do to defend this title under Carlo Ancelotti this year, knowing that they're pretty much out of the La Liga race? And also seeing for the first time since 1999, 3 Italian teams get this deep into the Champions League quarter. So again, there's a lot of interesting things to delve into, but it's going to be quite dramatic in every single way.
Well, gentlemen, the blue half of Manchester will come alive once more as they welcome Bayern Munich to the Etihad. One thing for certain, Manchester City and Bayern Munich, they always provide the goals. On average, 3 a game, from Lewandowski to Aguero, from Torre to Ribéry. They have met 6 times before, all in the group stage. 3 wins apiece. Brent and Juan, we did mention Pep Guardiola at the start of the show because all eyes will be on him. And I don't know if you want to call that he's in a bit of a conundrum. Maybe that's too harsh of a word, but just a few weeks ago, he would have been preparing for one coach as opposed to another. And it's an interesting perspective to look at here, Brent, because, of course, Julian Nagelsmann would have been on his mind. Now he's having to prepare for Thomas Tuchel. Do you prepare against teams or the tactics of the coaches? Your thoughts on this, Brent?
No, not in this particular fixture. I think if you were to pull it apart, I would suggest that obviously Pep Guardiola's team is in a lot better form than Thomas Tuchel's team. I think Tuchel just coming in is still trying to find his best 11, still trying to find the best way to play. So if I'm Pep Guardiola, I would want to enforce or, of course, put my tactics out front and make sure that the way I play would dictate the way the game goes and the flow of the game and the fluidity of the game. So from a Pep Guardiola's position, I think you'd be looking at it from that aspect and more try to be the one that's imposing himself on the team rather than reacting to a particular type of tactics.
And did Nagelsmann's dismissal come as a bit of a surprise to you?
No, it did not. Once the information started rolling in, it all started to make sense. I guess that'll probably be a better way to phrase it. Knowing what was going on, and like I said a couple of weeks ago, when all of a sudden the information about the quote-unquote mole ends up emerging, players that really weren't tuning in with Nagelsmann or stopped believing in him, in the dressing room stopped believing in him, then you knew it was just a matter of time before he was going to be gone. And we'll see how it plays out with Thomas Tuchel, who ends up being a coach that has had a series of run-ins towards the end that have had very similar endings as Nagelsmann did just recently at Bayern.
Just to continue on that point, in regards to Guardiola, of course, he's meeting his old employers in Bayern Munich, where he actually failed to win a Champions League there. Can you put into context the meeting of both these clubs and the meeting of the minds on the sidelines?
Well, in terms of the meetings of the clubs, it's two different histories. I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist for unveiling that. It's a club in City that needs this more than anything else. Needs it to be that final diamond, if you will, in that Thanos glove, to be able to really complete this team truly being great in the eyes of many. Not just a team that got great because foreign investors came in and put in over $1 billion of investment in certain players and teams. But in terms of Bayern, it ends up being maybe the consolidation of a club that maybe it was a philosophical burnout that you end up having with a coach that ends up being intense and at times trying to change things and trying to fix things when they weren't really broken per se, and also running the patience thin of various individual players. So again, it's these types of things that you end up looking at, the behind the scenes, that do end up making a great deal of difference when it comes down to it.
Brent, Manchester City, of course, they have a machine up front in Erling Haaland. Of course, he scored 5 goals in the round of 16 matchup with RB Leipzig. It was a record equaling 5 goals that he netted in just the one game. And he's actually been brilliant all season, Erling Haaland. He has scored, 10 goals in the Champions League and 40 goals overall this season. I mean, what are you anticipating from him as the competition gets stiffer?
More goals. At the end of the day, he's a player on his day is probably unplayable. And you add the fact that he is part of a setup in Manchester City that is probably one of the best offensive teams in world football. And I include international country type football in that as well. Of course, teams can set up in a particular way and make his afternoon tough, but generally speaking, what he brings to the table is of course next level. Just look at the records that have fallen in the EPL because of him and what he's been able to do in his first year, despite the fact that in the first couple of games people were ready to write him off. So there's no doubt in my mind that he is a key component for Manchester City doing well today, and if Bayern Munich is not careful, he is going to be the one that could put them to the sword.
Erling Haaland was brought in because the thought process was that he would have been the one to push them over the line as far as the UEFA Champions League is concerned. I'm going to jog back your mind to the 2021 Champions League final, Man City against Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea. Guardiola was ridiculed for not playing an out-and-out striker. Sergio Aguero and Gabriel Jesus they were on the bench in that final. Do you think he can be that difference maker, despite the fact that it is said at times that City look a little bit off and not as fluent when he's on the park? At times.
At times, and it's not. I mean, in part, it's not his fault. There was a great soundbite by Thierry Henry when they were asking him about what he had to do to adjust when he was playing alongside Dennis Bergkamp or Freddie Ljungberg or players of that ilk that were feeding him the ball on a consistent basis. And what he said, he talked about him being able to change in order to maximize what his teammates are able to do. Well, Erling Haaland, when you start looking at the runs, when you start looking at the movements that he does in reference to Kevin De Bruyne, in reference to Ilkay Gundogan, in reference to many of those that are behind him, Rodri, he still makes the same runs. So it's a matter of them adjusting to him instead of the other way around. And I think that's not a problem if you've seen just his goal-scoring record. It's been him, the major threat in terms of what City have been able to create, despite the adaptation that he's had to make, but to his teammates, not necessarily to the league. With the league, he's absolutely torn it up.
We're going to hear from Ruben Dias now, the Man City defender, as he looks ahead to facing Bayern Munich, and in particular his former teammate, Joao Cancelo. Let's hear from him now.
I must confess, it will be strange, just because not very long ago we were fighting together. But it is what it is. It's football. It's the life we live, and decisions have been made. And in a way, it will be good to play against him and to see him again.
Have you been in touch since the draw was made? Or?
Well, I guess that especially after our time here together, we built a close relationship, especially me, him, and Bernardo, and we kind of are always in touch. So yes, we've been in contact. But when the game starts, each one of us will be on his own side.
Well, let's talk a little bit of tactics now, especially on the side of Bayern Munich, because, of course, Nagelsmann has departed and he has been replaced by Thomas Tuchel. Brent, what do you expect from the sidelines now that Tuchel is in charge of Bayern?
I think in this particular fixture, there will be a huge slice of caution, and Thomas Tuchel will be naive to approach it any differently. He still, as I mentioned in the earlier part of this broadcast, has not really been able to find his best 11 yet, or consistency in play. That's understandable. Now, if you turn your minds back to when he did it with Chelsea, he did it with a lot of defensive solidity. And any manager would want to start there as their base. And he still does not have that yet. And that goes into the fact that I believe this fixture against Man City has come a little bit too soon for him. That being said, of course, I expect him to play with two holding midfielders. I expect him to play with a very solid back line, rigid. I expect him to draw up a very low block in approach to Manchester City. He's not going to want to, of course, leave any gaps and spaces for the Manchester City players to play. And he understands the way Pep Guardiola wants to play, and so he's going to try to set up in a way to make it very difficult for them.
Bayern Munich won. They've been trying out different formations even before Tuchel came in charge here. He's decided to go with a back four here, and Pavard, he experimented with Pavard in a previous game at centre-back. He's back playing at right-back. But the thing about Bayern is that they've been very good defensively, only conceded 2 goals this season in the Champions League. What are you anticipating in terms of the setup against City today?
Donald, the more things change, the more they stay the same. The more you start shifting around, backline of 3, backline 4, Bayern ends up coming back with what has been able to be the most successful formation for them. They're going to go 4-2-3-1. Look at it's going to be funny what I'm about to say. The wings are going to be what changed the game, but the difference is going to be in the middle. And why do I say that? Because no Joao Cancelo, it's going to be Davies and Leroy Sané. Or excuse me, not Leroy Sané, but Mane, Sadio Mane, that's going to be playing over on the left alongside him. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this Bayern side, with Pavard over on the wing, and then a bit further up top, it's going to be quite interesting to see where Thomas Müller ends up finding himself in Kingsley Coman. But you see the lineups, and it ends up being, it's not about, your best formation. It's about, okay, who's my best 11? And I think Bayern's coming out exactly with that.
Yeah, Mane, in fact, he's going to be coming off the bench, number 17 for Bayern Munich. Sane on the left, Kingsley Coman on the right. So it's an interesting formation. And as far as Man City is concerned, they're going with 3 at the back with Stones and Rodri in the middle of the park. So again, an interesting dynamic we expect from Manchester City as they face off with Bayern Munich in just a few minutes time. We take a quick break now. When we return, we preview that match in Lisbon, Benfica up against Inter Milan. Stay with us. maybe this is a tie where neither team starts as the favorites here, but only Napoli has scored more goals in the Champions League this season than Benfica. And Juan Arango and Brent Sancho still with me in studio. And Juan, does that give the advantage to Benfica in this matchup with Inter Milan?
It certainly does, and to be quite honest, it seems as if Benfica is a team that might end up surprising people. The way that they played so far in this competition, the way that they played so far this year, ends up really giving you the impression that if they're on their game today, they could be able to get into the semifinals. There have been some people that have said, hey, you know what? Don't overlook this Benfica side because they could get to this finals. They could get to the final of the Champions League. I think it's a bit of a stretch, but still, I wouldn't discard that possibility as minute as it may be. I mean, you've seen an overall great team performance so far in Champions League, so why not? So we'll see exactly where this takes us.
Champions of 1961, champions of 1962, Benfica, and they're making the quarterfinals for a second year in a row now. Brent, are they among Europe's elite?
Yeah, listen, if I was a player in any of the Man Cities or Bayern Munich's dressing room, that's the last team I want to meet, because what they bring to Champions League football they're not unpredictable. Is that they're consistent. They work hard off the ball, they counter press, they're lightning in terms of their attacking prowess and transition. They're everything you don't want to meet in a midweek game as a Champions League team. And as Juan just said, they're dark horses, and really and truly, this is a team that's flown under the radar for quite some time. We have to remember, they topped a group with Juventus and PSG. Yes, they would have, of course, sailed through with Club Brugge, but outside of that, this is a very difficult team to play against. And yes, they may not be given the plaudits to go away with the title at the end of the day, but don't be surprised if you see them at the end of when the smoke clears, lifting the trophy. They're that good.
One, Benfica's academy appears to have a secret sauce here. Of course, they have produced the likes of João Felix, Bernardo Silva, Ruben Dias, Cancelo as well. And they've extended their academies not only across Lisbon, but across the entire Portugal, getting out some gems, especially in the rural areas. Do you think that has been the key for them in churning out the talent year after year? Because remember that they started out the season losing 30 players.
Well, and then keep in mind that over the last 2 years, their two highest, the two players that they've sold for the highest price tags, both Darwin Nunez and Enzo Fernandez, end up leaving. So you end up losing major aspects of play. You end up losing someone that's fundamental in the midfield, and of course someone that was extremely lethal up top in order to do that. But Roger Smith's been able to do one thing that is quite interesting. And this team's gotten faster in terms of, I'm not faster necessarily in terms of pace, but faster in terms of how they handle the ball, how quick they go towards goal, how quick their decision makings are. And what you start to see is that there's been players that have kind of been drifting around over the past few years. The one I give the primary example to is Grimaldo over at left back. At times it seemed like he was on his way out. At times it seemed like he really had a lot of issues developing or growing into the position at Benfica. But this year you've seen him really take command and really become one of the interesting left backs in European football.
In 46 games in all competitions, of course, Benfica, they have just 2 losses to their names, and it's a big thing as well, just before we switch to Inter Milan, that they are going to be without the services of one Nicolas Otamendi due to a suspension. That's a big loss, Brent.
Yeah, that is a big loss. I agree with you, but I do think within there is enough there to still obviously complement it. You know, when you look at this tie, it's probably one of the ties that is not really spoken about enough. But when you look at the possibility, we obviously saw Inter against Portuguese opposition in the last leg, and they really had to hold on to get through. In fact, I think they were very, very fortunate to get through. Porto and Benfica, completely two different teams in terms of, obviously Porto beat them on the weekend, yes. But Benfica, what they present, and as Juan just said, in terms of the increase in their pace, there's so many different things in the different departments that they present that is going to cause Inter all sorts of problems. And to be honest with you, I just don't see how Inter is going to come out of this tie.
Well, we speak about the goal-scoring prowess of Benfica this season, but Inter Milan is comfortably at the other end of that spectrum. No quarterfinalist has scored fewer than the 11 which Inter has scored in the Champions League this season. Is that an issue, Juan?
Well, just look at the last time that they won. The last victory that they had was back on March the 5th. Since then, they haven't won, regardless of competition. So, and if you look, there's only... I'm just looking. There hasn't been a match. They haven't scored more than 2 goals in over 2 months, almost 2 months, I should say. So that should say a lot in terms of the not just the names of the attackers up top, Edin Dzeko and Lautaro Martinez. You're going to have a great attacking duo, but then the guy that has to come in and every so often bail you out is Romelu Lukaku off the bench. So that ends up being a major issue for them. And of course, you see right there how Inter have gone. This recent stretch, it ends up being a major issue for Simone Inzaghi and company, and they're going to have to try and out-manufacture opportunities in order to be able to at least have a chance or get a fighting chance to be able to get to the semifinals.
But Bernd, we are talking about Dzeko, we are talking about Lukaku, who's going to be off the bench, and we are talking about Martinez, who have been match winners in the past in a tournament structure, so to speak. Surely all it needs is for them to just turn up and play out of their skin or back to the levels that they are coming from.
Not when you're a striker. When you're a striker, it's about repetition. When you're a striker, it's about being in form. When you are a striker, it's about being confident in front of goal. Those 3 names you just called are probably at the bottom in Europe when it comes to confidence in front of goal, and I'm being very generous here. And so I just don't see how they can turn up and do anything to impact this game. Of course, knowing my luck, they're probably going to score it. But from what I've seen from them over there, it's just 3 guys that just lack confidence. And Lautaro Martinez in particular, he's a striker that at one point was probably one of the most sought after guys in Europe in terms of transfers to different clubs. And he's, I'm not suggesting that he's a bad player. I think he's extremely talented. He's just a player that's not playing with confidence.
History is on the side of Inter Milan, though, Juan. 2 wins and a draw in previous European meetings with Benfica. But do the keys to victory lie in their midfield? We're talking about Barella. We're talking about Brozovic here.
You just answered the question. That's where it lies. Because for anything to happen with Inter, it has to start going with Di Marco and Dumfries out wide. It has to start happening with Mkhitaryan and with Barella, also with Brozovic in the middle. So it's those players, or a combination of those players, finding their forwards on a consistent basis and giving them opportunities. You shoot your way in, you shoot your way out. You hear that quite often in other sports. But if you're not giving opportunities to your forwards, then you end up kind of handcuffing yourself despite every single opportunity you want to try and create. If you're not doing it up top, you're not doing it at all. And when you start seeing how this midfield ends up being, yes, they can defend very well. They have a very solid block. They can play a backline of 3, but then you don't see them on transition really scaring you. You don't see them on transition really putting teams on their back foot. It's the speed that this team plays out with that ends up kind of, you kind of can settle down. You can kind of readjust and reshuffle yourself. And Benfica, on top of being very good offensively, defensively, they've also proven that they can also be very solid. And that's where this ends up kind of being maybe a neutral score, or if you want to look at the different boxes you want to check, you probably end up checking the one in the middle, saying, well, neutral. Well, that's good enough for Benfica because offensively right now, they're much better.
Brent, Inzaghi said before the game in an interview, always put our hearts into everything, but we must use our heads as well. Is he under pressure to perform tonight?
I don't think he's necessarily under pressure as a manager. I think anyone that's looking at this Inter team would say that they just don't have the quality that they need to get through in this competition. In his heart of hearts, he would want them to do well. And as you just mentioned in the question before, that 1 or 2 of their top players just snap fingers and catch form. But it's not going to happen. And I'm very sure he's realistic with that. I'm very sure that he looked at the Porto fixture, it's a Portuguese team again, where he really struggled in the second leg, and even some parts of the first leg, and think that he would need a huge slice of luck to get through this round of football. And I think he understands that. And as much as he talks about heads, you can have all the head in the world, but if you don't have the quality and ability within the squad to do that, I don't think you win. And Inter Milan has been less than a squad for most of this season. They've been a mixed bag of nuts.
Well, let's take a look at the starting lineup for Benfica. We're expected to see the midfield absolutely flooded here. Juan Arango, Dumfries. You mentioned that Dumfries, of course, is going to be along that right-hand side. But what are you anticipating with this lineup that you're seeing here?
Well, as always, you see Benfica. We'll start over with Alex Grimaldo. He's going to be supporting in terms of the attack. Gilberto will probably end up doing the same. Interesting to see Morato and Antonio up top, or excuse me, in the central defense, of course. No Nico Tamendi. But what do we end up seeing? Florentino and Chiquinho being very solid in the middle. João Mario Rafa and Orsens alongside Gonzalo Ramos. They end up being the engine of this team going forward. They're the ones that really create all these situations that Inter are going to have to deal with time and time again.
Brent, your thoughts on the starting lineup?
Yeah, it's as we said, they've set up the way they've put forward their team. But I think again the biggest challenge they would have is of course trying to stymie the attacking power that Benfica possesses, and whether or not, of course, the ability of their fullbacks getting forward, that those holes will be covered. And this game is going to be decided on transition, whether or not Inter Milan can stop Benfica going forward transition-wise, and whether or not from their perspective they can get the right results transition and get the numbers forward and of course be potent in attack, and that's the bottom line. The midfield battle is going to decide this game.
Yeah, I was being a little bit presumptuous a little bit early on by saying Dumfries. I was actually speaking of Inter Milan with them playing 5 across the middle of the park. They are actually flooding the middle of the park, and it's an interesting lineup that they have gone with Juan Arango. What are your thoughts on it based on the thinking of their coach?
Well, it's what they've played with throughout. I mean, they've played mostly with a back line of 3. With Bastoni, Acerbi, and Darmian playing in the back. So, I mean, you see how basically this is beginning to set up. And that's why I was so adamant about both Di Marco and Denzel Dumfries being those players that make a difference and open things up offensively, because at times Inter have tended to get a little too narrow in their attack, limiting the amount of opportunities for Lautaro Martinez, for Edin Dzeko, whoever ends up being up top. That ends up kind of limiting the space that they can operate within. So if those two players can start opening things up out wide, then you start to see a great deal of difference, maybe even a more different side for Inter. Now, can that happen? That's another whole different question that we have to wait and answer.
What are your predictions, gentlemen? We're at that stage of the show, starting with you, Juan.
I like Benfica, and I like a draw between Bayern and City.
Huh. Okay, Brent.
I didn't hear one scoreline for.
Oh, okay. Well, you want me to go there? Sure.
Sure. Go ahead.
Benfica 2-0. Benfica 2-0. 2-2 between Bayern and City.
All right. And Brent.
I'll go with I'd certainly go with a Benfica win. I think 2-0. Because I just don't see Inter scoring, even if they played until tomorrow morning. As well.
And as far as the other game is concerned?
Yeah, for Bayern Munich, Man City, I just think it's Man City's here, and I can see them winning 2-1.
All right, thank you very much.
Can I change my prediction now that Brent said Benfica's going to win 2-0?
You probably should, actually. Anyway, it's time to leave. It's time to head over to Benfica's home ground. Inter Milan, of course, as the visitors, they're hoping to reach the last 4 of the Champions League for the first time since it won the title back in 2010. Benfica is seeking to break an even longer drought and get past this quarterfinal stage for the first time since losing the final to Inter's rival AC Milan back in 1990. The Stadium of Light in Lisbon awaits this matchup.